Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Higher Ground podcast. With me today is my friend Matt Small. Matt and I worked together at Capco. I'm just going to say a few years ago, which I seem to say a lot on this podcast. It was a couple of years, maybe a couple more than a couple. But rather than me try to introduce you, why don't you do our guest the honor of introducing yourself?
Sure. My background is a little bit unique. I spent half my career in industry and half my career in consulting. I've worked on the front office side, trading. That's where I started. I've also run operations group, and I've run very large technology groups as well. So kind of a bit of a unique hybrid career. And over the last 8 years, I've been working with a firm called Ante Partners. And it's really, everything that Ante Partners does is everything I've spent a career building.
And Ante, A-N-T-E.
Yep.
As in ante up kind of?
No, it's, Ante Partners is a reincarnation of another company from way back when called Verite, which me and another person started. We definitely lean towards Latin. So ante in Latin is forward.
Okay, I see. I did not realize that. That's awesome. Okay, my Latin needs some updating apparently. So that's amazing.
Yeah. Well, if you took me back even further in my history, but then you're gonna really date us. I'd tell you I had 12 years of Latin with a kind of Jesuit upbringing.
I mean, that speaks volumes, and I think we're going to get into some of the benefits of that kind of education. It would be my guess.
Maybe not.
Or not. Yeah, no. We're open, as the Jesuits are open to new ideas. So we'll give it a go. Awesome. What I like to do is start off to get to know each other a little bit and ask a set of sort of this or that. What do you like, this or that kind of questions? And let me go for a somewhat controversial one with my audience: dogs or cats?
Dogs.
Okay. You paused there for a bit. You were concerned about upsetting my audience. Is that what that was?
Well, I had cats growing up and dogs. My wife is allergic to cats, so I've now kind of acclimated to a life that is just going to have dogs.
Understood. Yeah, that's awesome. Do you prefer planned events or more spontaneous?
Spontaneous.
Just go for it. Okay. And then when you're contemplating a vacation, are you a mountain person, a beach person, something else?
I am probably more varied. I don't like doing the same thing over and over again. So I tend to like new experiences, whether it's kind of surfing or skydiving or hitting a beach or going boating or.
Nice. I want to pull on the skydiving thread for a moment. Are you an avid skydiver, or did it once, never again?
I used to be. I went down the path of trying to get certified in my much earlier years. So
that's I have stood by the fence watching the plane go up and going, could I do this? Could I do this? Short answer is no.
You can. Anybody can.
I know you can. I did the zip line once at a Capco event. Was it a Capco event? No, it was a different software company event. And that was terrifying, but I did it. So once you saw the person who was, let's just say 20 years my senior, jump out of the tree, I'm like, oh man, I got to go.
Yeah.
So that's when you go. All right. Yeah, I got it. So do you find yourself operating on logic primarily or gut feel?
I would say I lean into gut quite a bit, but I always kind of balance it with, does it even make sense?
Okay, I'm going to go down a Jesuit path now. Free will or destiny?
Free will.
I'm with you there. I think there's a path, but I think we get to choose it. Yeah. That's kind of, I guess I kind of answered the both side of that equation. And then my transition into the interviewing side of the house. Do you prefer phone screens or GVC? Google. Do you prefer video conferencing or in-person interviews?
I prefer in-person. And I get that the world's changing and we've all been forced to kind of adapt. I still get a lot more value out of face-to-face contact.
Yeah, I fundamentally agree. It's just it's harder these days. We used to start with phone screens and actual telephone, right? Now that you could see the person, I don't think it's a substitute for the in-person meeting, but fantastic. So I know one of the hallmarks of AntePartners is program rescue, right? Recovering a failed 100 million from our conversations and from the website is recovering $100 million program is not a planning exercise, right? It's hands-on triage. When you say program triage, what does that actually mean? And how do you get past some of the defensiveness of stakeholders?
And I love
that's a fun one.
Pointing out the defensiveness of stakeholders.
Something couldn't I spent all this money. What could I have possibly done wrong, Matt?
Yeah. It is, so I have been pulled into so many programs over the course of my career, and I will say there is a lot of commonality. So, you think every problem is, let's dive into this and figure out what the unique thing is. And I find that there are a number of things that always surface very quickly. So what does it mean for me? When I go into a program, it's, I really approach it with the same steps, and they've gotten better over time.
Sure.
But I find, so you said defensiveness and you pointed to leaders. And the reality is when I'll take kind of the last engagement I did that was kind of very, very large scale, but $250 million was out the door before I even arrived.
That's the investment they made, and I want to say burned, but that's the point they got to.
Well, they did. There's almost nothing to show for it. So, and 500 people working on a program. So the first thing that I did was, and I find that this is always the case. I get the first line and the second line, of reports into one room, and I look at those as individuals. I ask a ton of questions, and I look around the room and see who is defensive, who's sitting back not saying anything, who is looking at other people because they're afraid to talk.
Permission to talk. Yeah.
And when you said, how do you like doing interviews? It's for the same reason. I can read people much better when I'm in a room with them. And, that if that's kind of table stakes.
Okay.
Will give you, let me give you a quick anecdote, because I think it's a really good story. But it gives people kind of a good frame of reference and, around how you approach program triage, because people could take it and deploy it in many ways. The one thing that I always have done is when I land in an organization, the first thing I do is I take the most senior people, and it could be officers in the company, MDs, it could be senior VPs or EVPs. And I say, all right, so you're responsible for what? And they say, and I'll give you kind of a real example. Person comes in, and this is just 5 years ago, says, I own these 3 applications that are in development that are in support of this program. I say, great. Can you log in? Do they have UIs? Can you demo them for me? And he said, absolutely. Let me get one of my team to schedule that. And I said, oh, no. I want you to log in right now. I want you to show me. He said, I don't have a login. And I said, you don't have a login for the application you're responsible for? And
I mean, there's so much in there right now.
Yeah. So, but this is kind of how I approach these things, because I want the people in the room to own the stuff that they are delivering. And I find that, when you walk into these programs that are seriously off the rails, you have too many levels of middle management, too many reporters and managers of truth, rather than bringing the people who are actually doing the work to the table. And I don't mean to be disruptive with, burying people who are doing work with, 3 hours of meetings. I start, as soon as you can figure out who's doing the work, you can get an update in 5 minutes, and you tell them, hey, no deckware. I want a live update. I don't want an update that was curated over a 2-week period.
Cost of building those decks, and the time and the vetting and the socialization. A 30-minute meeting could cost 20 hours. Easily.
Yeah.
No, that's good. I love the show me the demo yourself. I like that.
Yeah. We had another guy who came in and said he ran one of the a fixed income trading desk, same program. And I said, great. So you run the desk. How many people are on it? He said, a lot. And I said, well, you run the desk. You must know how many people you have. He says, yeah. Like 20. I said, like 20 or 20? Because it's a difference. Can you show me the profitability of all the traders on your desk? He said, we measure total profitability. I said, how do you know if one trader's not doing their job?
Or one trader's doing the job of 20?
Right, exactly. So it's the same thing. It's like asking questions either from a business lens, or if it's a technology person from a technology lens, they say there's no UI. You say, that's okay. I don't need a UI. Can we look at the code? I just want to see how it's
Sure.
structured.
Yeah.
How many
Show me the
lines of
output. No.
code have been developed?
Yeah. I hate
You
that
need
metric, but I
logging for
do.
all
It
that.
does. It does. It's not a metric I'm a fan of, but it does answer the question of, like, what is the output, right? Or can you show me the spreadsheet results of your analysis, even if it's
Exactly.
not
And
a
these
if it's
are,
not a GUI? Yeah.
all I'm really trying to get at is how close are people to the truth?
To the truth, yeah, and to the work. It sounds like, but I can see in the situation in the example you gave, where the person or the as you're interviewing the different people, the measurement of defensiveness, I could see that as a problem, right? If you're getting that vibe, is your objective to kind of bring everyone onto the same page at some point? Because sometimes
Yeah.
defensiveness is a trait that requires more therapy than one
Yeah.
can get in business, in a business environment, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So I think like there are a number of people that have seen me throughout my career. So they know that typically within the first 2 to 3 weeks, there's going to be a bunch of people gone.
Oh, okay.
I don't like you're never going to get a program to move faster by coddling the people that don't know, or the too many levels of middle management. So kind of step one is kind of clearing the decks of anybody who's not actually doing work. And that's not to say you're getting rid of all the leaders. It's saying there are some leaders who will know all the everything that's happening. They're good leaders, and you say like, there, and maybe those are the people that you expand their remit a bit because they care. They want to understand the work that they're responsible for. But then you have to kind of keep, it's not the people's only the first thing. The next thing is, okay, and I don't go in and say, show me all your Gantt charts, but I'm very like a big popular thing that, a lot of people have witnessed over the time is me saying, can I get an update? And the first person says, yep, here, let me bring something up on the screen. They bring up a PowerPoint deck, and I say, when is this from? They said, oh, it was prepared for you. Okay, how long did it take to prepare? 2 weeks. Okay, so is this all 2 weeks old? I don't want any more decks. And going forward, we're going to measure everything that's done not in 3 or 6 month periods. We're going to measure everything that's done in a week. So if you can't show me something done in a week, then your program schedule, your Gantt chart, whatever it is you're going to show me, your project plan, is not detailed enough.
Or it's immediately stale, right? Yeah. Yeah, I like that, and I like I've seen this throughout my career as well in consulting and in industry. It's the amount of preparation time and time it goes into getting the right words. It's a stylistic thing. Some people want that pomp and circumstance, but I think when it comes time to recovering a broken program, right, or getting it back on track, it's a key ingredient. Okay, so you mentioned people, you mentioned the reporting or the project or program management piece of it. What are some of the other key ingredients that you see at an initial triage?
Yeah, we talked a little bit about the plan. Is the plan a set of actionable steps, or is it a series of objectives?
Okay.
And there's a big difference. But you've seen this as well, Tom. You walk in and people say like, "Here's my very detailed project plan." You look at the first item and you say like, "Okay, how would you do that?" Because that seems more like an objective rather than a thing you're going to do.
Yeah.
So
It's
are
not
you
a
at the
breakdown
right
of
level of
steps.
detail?
Yeah.
I also believe that you will do more with less. And time has proven me to be 100% right in that regard. More people does not make anything go fast.
Oh yeah.
Much smaller teams and much smaller measurable results. I've never been a fan of big bang strategies. I say if you have a big program, break it up into the smallest parts and let's start measuring what's done.
Yeah.
Let's stage delivery such that we're kind of building a new reality. The one coming back to the defensive side, though, it is interesting because when you take out a whole bunch of people in an organization, there's always, and you really have to, like people who are very good at this in terms of program recovery, they'll have an awareness that when you take out some of that fat that wasn't doing anything, it was probably disruptive or kind of, almost slowing progress. Because they're asking people for updates or saying, I need this report. Can you do this deck? And all these people, because they don't know it. So they need people to do it for them. when you clear those people out, there will always be an unintended consequence. And that is that if people weren't defensive before, they're going to get defensive then, because they
Oh,
just
interesting.
saw a whole bunch of people leave. And people who are very good at this, and I've seen this a lot over the course of my career with, mentors and, people who have, you sit and you witness this and you say like, okay, I get it. You really have to make sure that you are creating kind of a new culture where people aren't afraid to talk. And you can do that through exercises, and I enjoy some exercises I've done over the course of my career, but you make things fun in a way that gets people thinking about raising their hand and saying, I saw something, it doesn't look right. And that's very hard to do when they just saw all of their middle level management disappear or their executives disappear. Everybody's like, oh, not me next. And you really got to get people to understand, look, we're smaller, we're more nimble. I have an open door, but so do the people upstream and downstream of you. We have to start kind of raising our hand when we see something.
Yeah. I like the example that when I was at Nomura Securities. Actually, one of the things that we were rewarding people for, frankly, was finding bugs. The whole idea that we're not going to that an issue or a bug is a problem is completely wrong. It's something is broken. We need to fix it. It's a good thing you found it, right? And the idea of being able to change the dynamic of hiding the problem or putting a basket over the fire, rather than saying, "Hey, this thing is on fire," was a shift, and it took a lot of work. And it's a culture, like you said, it's a cultural shift. So it's not easy, but it's incredibly powerful.
Yeah, and I think the people who sit in my seat, kind of being dragged into programs, the more creative they can get with activities or exercises that force people to change their DNA. Like, okay, because it is uncomfortable, especially take a program that's been going on for 2 years. People have fallen into a cadence of, if it is off the rails, it's a bad cadence. Whatever they're doing, it's not working.
It's not working. It's not working.
So you need to kind of shift that. And I could give you a really quick story. It's a Fannie Mae story, but everybody from Fannie Mae knew it.
Please do. Yes.
So I did the largest transformation that a GSE has ever done, at Fannie Mae. And I'd written a white paper years before, so saying exactly how they should do it. And they decided to ignore the how, and they just went after the what and went big bang. And then years later, I'm brought in to kind of come back. And, the gentleman who is the president at the time said, "Are you sure this could really be done?" I said, "Yeah, 100%, and it could be done in less than 2 years." "Yeah, why?" He said, "Well, because people are going to get fired if this doesn't happen."
And I think he's thinking about himself.
Yeah. So, and the board's very involved at that point. So shortly, not long into me joining their senior management team, I got a rolling computer table delivered to my home. And it was something that I just thought would be good in my home office. Just, put the computer on it and I can move it around and, do different, if I wanted to go over to this side and work on this thing, I can just take the computer and move it that way. So, it was this silly thing I got on Amazon, but it took me about, a half hour to assemble before I realized there's something wrong with the table itself.
Okay.
And I'm looking and I'm trying to figure out, how is this going to work? So the base has 4 coasters that get inserted into these holes, and they almost snap in.
Sure.
But there's one hole is on the top instead of the bottom. So I realize it's just a defect in the product.
Sure.
So
somebody drilled the hole in the wrong side.
Yeah. So I took the whole thing apart with the instructions, put it all back in the box. But rather than return it to Amazon, I said, I'm going to take this to Fannie Mae. I brought it into the office and I said, okay, brought in all of my directs. This is after the second round of cuts. So kind of we're a nimble team now, but people are very defensive and nobody's raising their hand. There's no, if you see something, say something mentality. Everybody's scared. So I said, all right, we're going to get teams of 6 to 10, and we're going to try to make them cross-pollinated. So no groups. These will be people that don't naturally work with each other.
Okay.
It's, on the technology side, you take somebody and then you pair them with people upstream and downstream of them in terms of their work. On the business
Business
side,
analyst, you might have a tester over here. You might have
And
administration.
I tried to mix even business and technologists. Let's get everybody talking to each other.
Okay.
So I said, all right, so nobody's working today. We should consider this an offsite day. And nobody's going to get dinged for not doing anything. I want everybody to kind of hang out, and we're going to take everybody in groups. And I'm going to tell you who's in each group as the groups are called. So nobody's going to know who's in the group until it's called.
Okay.
And when you are done, you are not going to come back to this room. You can go back to your desks. You can go back to work, whatever. So I had each of these groups come in to a conference room next to my office. And I said, okay, here's what I want you guys to do. I have this rolling computer table. I want you to assemble it. There's instructions in the box, and I want you to take everything out. I want you to lay everything out on the table, and I want you to assemble it. If you have any issues whatsoever, please just knock on my door. My door will be open. I have no meetings today. Just, hey, we have an issue. I'm not expecting any, but if there are, please see me. When it's all assembled, I want you to take a picture, and then I want you to disassemble it. I want you to show the picture of the fully assembled thing. And when you disassemble it, I want you to lay everything back out on the table exactly as you initially did. So the first group, about an hour later, they come in and they say, we're done. And I say, that took longer than I expected. And I'm starting to do the math in my head saying, this is going to turn into a 2-day activity. So I said,
there's that many teams.
Yeah, I said, let's see the picture. They show me a picture, and the only thing you can't see is that one leg. So you can see the 3 casters, but not the one. And I said, no issue. They said,
level?
No, everything's great.
Oh, boo. Boo.
Next group came in. So Tom, I'm trying to make this short, but all the groups go through this, and every group does the same profile of thing, except for one. And in one group, there's this very junior PM, extremely junior, and he's arguing with them. Everybody's saying, listen, you're not in charge. He's saying, we got to say something. He said, if we see anything wrong, clearly it's wrong.
The instruction was laid out. Matt was very clear about the expectation.
Somebody's got to go in. They said, we're not doing that. We're not doing that. Every other group did it. I'm sure we can figure it out. And if we can't, just take the picture and, well, don't stop. Don't create issues. He leaves them, and they're yelling at him. He leaves them, comes in my office and says, Mr. Small? I said, yes.
Yes.
He said, there's an issue, but they don't want to tell you. And I said, what is the issue? He said, the issue is that there's something wrong with the table. There's these casters, and the whole base, there's 3 holes underneath and 1 hole on the top. So there's nowhere for the caster to go. And they're talking about cutting the caster off and gluing it. I'm like,
now you know how the project got off the rails, right?
Exactly. So, but here's the thing. Then, the next day we did a town hall, and I walked everybody through the exercise, the activity. And I said, look, I'm not dinging anybody. What I'm trying to do is instill a different culture, a culture where when we see something, we raise our hand immediately. Because this program's never going to get done. There's too many moving parts, too many upstream and downstream activities.
Dependencies, yeah.
One person has one issue, the knock-on effect could be horrific. Yeah. So we really have to be aware in the moment. And when you see something, raise your hand, escalate immediately, and don't be afraid, because nobody will ever be fired for raising their hand.
Yeah.
And it's those types of activities. You got to be inventive, but you can turn them into something fun.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah, and the idea, we talk about this a lot, at Google and other companies I work for, is this notion of psychological safety, right? I can raise my hand, I could say something's broken without having to worry about getting shot. And without it, you get these types of behaviors that are, you don't listen to every voice. People are afraid to tell the truth. They shut, like you said, the guy or gal who's not saying boo, they're like, whatever, I'm going to get my check, and whatever happens, right? It's like that. None of these things are going to be helpful. Thank you for sharing that. It's quite a good use of something that could have just been returned like that.
Yeah. It's, I remember being asked to talk about that exercise with the board.
Mm,
And,
it's a good
I was
one.
having these monthly updates with the board, and I remember saying, it didn't go as I expected because I thought I had already made changes in the culture.
Yeah.
I expected to see elements of it, but I didn't expect it to be such a gross failure.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And I ultimately did, cover it off with the board. And I said, look, our primary objective is not just getting this program done. It's also changing kind of how the company operates,
Yeah.
the culture itself. And culture is a very, very hard thing to change.
Very. Yeah, very. And it's slow, and it takes concentrated effort, and everyone's got to be bought in, and yeah, it doesn't happen overnight. So let's talk about the $168 million haircut. I think in this similar sort of vein, you're VP at the American Stock Exchange. You managed to cut a $168 million technology budget by 24% in only 16 months, and improving internal controls.
Yeah.
Can
Yeah.
you tell some of our guests, first of all, when we say controls, maybe elaborate for some of the non-financial or the accounting folks, what, governance folks, what controls are and what it means in this context?
Yeah, so that's a great question, Tom, and you're usually good with hitting harder questions. So, what does control mean for in the context of this thing? So
Yeah,
the
no, you don't have to do the broad industry. We don't know what it is. We don't know how to define it. And we
yeah,
can, for God's sakes, we can't even test it.
so one thing that you do know, because you and I go back to Capco days, so the exchange and the trading space and capital markets. In the exchange space, exchanges can't go down ever. So
Period.
you're talking when they measure uptime, they're looking for uptime 100%.
Yeah. Yeah. It's end decimal places. It's not good enough to be 100, right? It's 100 point.
Yeah, yeah. So when I talk about making sure that we're improving controls, a lot of it was around making sure that we weren't creating instability in an ecosystem that could be disruptive to, one, the self-regulatory obligations of an exchange, two, the uptime that's required, kind of every minute of the markets being open, and then three, making sure that you aren't. I'm gonna you've heard the expression throw the baby out with the bathwater.
Yes.
When you're making cuts, you really have to be very aware of, are the cuts going to introduce risk to processes that are running that other people are entirely reliant on. So that's kind of
Surgical, so to speak.
that's the answer to the kind of, it's I think about the controls in the exchange space as kind of in those kind of maybe three verticals.
And then,
And then you're probably going to ask, all right, how'd you do 100? How'd you get that big a cut?
well, I mean, sure, right? I mean, in today's environment, the whole idea of cutting is problematic for employees, right? Because they're the one who got cut, or
Right.
they're the one who's feeling the pain of these types of things. And there's the capitalism reality that the entity must live on, and sometimes the entity has swollen in size or has become inefficient, and that in order for the entity to keep living on, these reductions need to take place. And that is the reality of the model, particularly in capital markets, right?
Yeah.
The markets are ruthless, and it's compete or die, right? And it's a tough topic, but I think the point I'm curious about is, how do you do this in a way that is effective, but also in a way that people are able to feel there's hope, and like, okay, I passed the first wave, let me go find another job before the second wave hits.
Yeah. It's so I think, obviously, to make that large a hit to a budget, there is a people component. And, I'm not going to be totally redundant to say, yeah, you look at how many layers of middle management you have, and boom, and God, they're such big ticket items. They higher cost executives, get rid of them all. And yeah, no, that's you do some of that. That's not going to get you there. So this is when you're doing these types of, like, if you're an organization and you have a challenge to get to a significant reduction in your operational cost, there is, as you just pointed out, something driving that kind of decision. And we've both been there. typically you need it to survive. So it's not like you're doing this because you feel like it might be fun. You're doing it because your operational costs have ballooned and you can no longer sustain them. So, and when it has to be that big a cut, it means that there's probably a sense of urgency around it in that you can't sustain it even in the near term. So when you look at those types of problem statements, it's not going to ever be one thing. It's going to be, you're going to have to look at it through a whole, a myriad of different lenses. And the first thing you would do, like the first natural thing, is to look at the line items in a budget and say, all right, I want the most detailed budget I can get. I want to see every line item. And I want it even broken down by, if we have cost by application, I want the cost by application. I want all the licensing costs. I want all the hardware costs. I want the people costs. I want the operational cost, whether it's, system operations or pure business operations. So you have to kind of start walking through every component piece of every function that's being delivered. What is supporting that function, whether it's technology or people or business and operations, and then what are the component, all the line items within it? Because it's not what so in this instance, it's it was taking cuts across the board. But when you start looking at all the all that detail, you really have to keep raising up your head and say, am I losing the forest through the trees?
Through the trees,
When you start raising your head, you become aware of things. Like things become immediately obvious a month in. You say, wait a second, I saw that license somewhere else. You say, oh wait, so we have 2 licenses from the same company. So is the license agreement requiring 2 licenses? And you start drilling into these things, but then you can then, as you get smarter on that stuff, you're going to start finding other things. And those other things are typically over engineering of solutions. And they require a little investment for a big save. And that is that's always a hard thing for a company that has urgency around cost reduction to swallow. When you say, look, I want to start 3 different programs, all oriented towards simplification. They are not without cost. I need $1 million for this. I need $5 million for this. I need $100,000 for this. Every executive management team or board is going to say, I like the 100,000.
That was my first thought, I'll confess. I was like, ooh, low-hanging fruit, right?
Yeah, exactly. And you say like, okay, that's great. We can do that but we will get to the end point faster if we do all 3 of those at the same time. And sometimes you can get people comfortable that they're going to trust you and they're going to say, let's do 2 rather than 3 or 3 rather than 4. Other times you won't have the confidence of your leadership and they're going to say, I'll tell you what, do one and prove that actually has some savings.
Sure.
And then we'll do the next. And in those instances, you just have to make sure that people are aware that is a conscious decision to slow your save. It's not like all you're doing by staggering these reductions and not doing things in parallel, you will not get to that reduction in the time frame that you were hoping. So, you kind of, when I always listen to people talk about, I have a very structured approach to cost savings. I go through these 3 things and they boom, boom, boom. And I say like, it's never that simple, ever.
And the trade-offs, the one phenomenon I've noticed again and again over the years has been redundancy in fill in the blank, right? It's not always people. It's often teams that deliver the similar outcome with a minor twist, or teams that buy. Your example about software license. In financial services, it's software license. It's also the purchasing of data, and the data costs are enormous, and whether or not you have the right to redistribute, right? So I've got to buy it, Matt's got to buy it, Mary's got to buy it, Tina's got to buy it, right? So a creative licensing approach there could save maybe not 3/4 of that cost, but at least half, right? And it becomes a negotiation, and then you've got line item savings that are quote unquote easy, maybe not for the vendor, but this is, if we've got to, it's a key.
people love, I've seen this, you've seen this. People love to buy new toys too,
And build
right?
them too. Yes.
Yeah.
But yes,
So
yes.
you could have a propagation of toys, none of which are being used. And you're
I'm just going to
paying
say we
monthly
have this.
on them. You have hardware for them. Another thing people that never look at, or rarely look at is utilization. Whether it's hardware, it's not just people utilization. It's also
Sure.
hardware utilization, network utilization. Take the American Stock Exchange. I was like, okay, so we're using what? These are saying we're using 3% of our network at our peak moments. They say, well, it could never go down. I'm like, okay, but 3? I mean, how big did we build this? They said, well, quote traffic's always increasing all the time. It's, people are, this could
What's the
triple.
curve look like? What does the curve look like? Okay, so it triples to
This could triple
9%.
This could triple in a month without us even knowing. I'm like, well, then we should know. We should start measuring it, right? How long does it take to buy more network capability? I don't know, a couple days. I think we just found our answer.
I think we found a lot of savings right there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. But you see, this is the thing. You can't come in like, your cookie cutter 3-step process. You're going to come in and everything is going to, I'm sure you've got a framework you're operating in and the categories you're bucketing, et cetera. Yeah. But the idea that you could know something like that walking in is impossible. Otherwise, they would have figured it out already.
Yeah. And Tom, it comes back to the same point we made in the kind of program recovery part. It's about getting to the people who are doing, because, even with cost cutting in a short period of time, you can't afford to be talking to people who are reporting on stuff or managing stuff. You got to get very close to the people who are doing, or you can make some pretty big mistakes.
Yeah. Yeah. The closer you are to the problem and to the space, the more accurate, more effective the answer and your change will be, right? That makes sense. So tell me a bit. I know you've developed an AI-enabled model risk management (MRM) framework with agents embedded. There's just so much. There's so much. No, I'll say noise, but there's this argument around AI is going to change the world, save the world, ruin the world. Given how regulated the financial sector is, you've got AI efficiency gains, and then guardrails like the standards SR 11-7. Mm-hmm. So how do you strike a balance when you're offering a solution that has the potential versus the guardrails? And maybe you could explain SR 11-7 to our audience as well.
Sure. SR 11-7 has been wholly replaced with SR 26-2. Oh. And anybody who knows kind of these regulatory Fed issued guidance pieces know that the 26 is the year, just as 11 was the year. It does tell you how stale SR 11-7 was.
I did not catch that. I won't even say nuance, that fact. So that's on me.
Yeah. No. It's late breaking. It's within the last 2 months. So the latter part of April. And, it was kind of quietly introduced after business hours on a Friday.
Gee, that sounds familiar.
Yeah. So it's, but and the SR 26-2, we're seeing, or like I'm having a lot of conversations about it because people are saying, we're looking at SR 26-2. What do you think that means? Because a lot of people's perspective is it's just talking about deregulation. And I said, I would not confuse this with deregulation. And I'm sure it's influenced by deregulation, but SR 11-7 was probably the most prescriptive guidance from a regulator. And all of the regulatory bodies had kind of coalesced around 11-7 because it says this is the exact steps that you need to take to conform to all the regulatory guidelines for model risk management, and very prescriptive. SR 26-2 says we're not going to be prescriptive anymore. We're done with that. And there's a reason why.
Let me pause you for 1 second. So when we say model risk management, we're talking about creating financial models to predict risk in different scenarios, and whether it's on a trading floor, whether it's on credit agreements, right? Whether it's could be for any purpose, or is it specific? Is it specific to capital market?
No, because you have the same thing in banking and lending.
You have the same. Okay, so it's literally how do we manage models to manage risk within financial services?
Exactly. And for all of those, whether it's the OCC, the FDIC, the Fed, they'll all reference back to SR 11-7, and now SR 26 was a co-issued update. So all of those bodies, all those regulatory bodies are in support of 26.2, which essentially just says we're not going to tell you what to do anymore, because it's not as simple as you doing these things. You can do all those steps, but if you haven't said, all right, we're doing all these steps but we'll do them as fast as we can to get to as many models as we can. The Fed is saying like, look, you need to figure out what is the right level of risk associated with that particular model. Like how much market risk or credit risk or financial risk or liquidity risk do you have with that model, and make your risk management to that model commensurate with the risk that model holds.
Oh, I see. Okay.
So they didn't say stop doing all those things.
Right.
What they said is you need to get smarter because models are growing so rapidly with agentic AI, LLM, that you're going to have to start thinking about what is the risk associated with that model, and then make sure that your risk management is commensurate with the risk.
I see. So it's kind of giving principled guidance rather than prescriptive stepwise guidance.
Exactly. Which then also does, make us, the U.S. financial markets with SR 11.7 looked very different than, I shouldn't say very different. They look different than, say, the European regulations around model risk management, which was less prescriptive and more, conceptual. Like these are the things you really need to be thinking about. And now you have, at least some more commonality between the two.
But usually these sets of regulations are to establish, obviously, guidelines for institution to do X, Y, Z. At some point, there's a test, or there's an audit, or there's some kind of compliance to this regulation. I would assume, I don't know this one intimately, but it's pretty common follow on to, here's a rule. Okay, how'd you do at some periodicity, right? Or whether it's annual, quarterly, or whatever. How do you test? How do you plan for tests that are less prescriptive? You gave me the rubric for the test. Now you're saying you get to design your own rubric. I would imagine it's even harder for institutions to now evidence. Now, here's the rubric I came up with. I have to now defend the rubric and then show you my results. And what's to stop an institution from coming up with results they don't like and going back and changing their own rubric?
They could. I think the reality is that all of those like general tenets and prescriptive guidance in SR 11.7, they don't go away. They were quality. It was a very well articulated quality guidance.
I see.
Like I've had a lot of discussions now, even with some of our regulators about it. The reality is the regulators don't want people going through a documentation exercise. They want people managing risk. And if this turns into we did all the steps, so therefore we pass. No, it's not as simple as doing the steps.
I see.
The steps have to be, the results of the steps have to be meaningful. And then the risk associated with them needs to be managed.
I see.
So it is kind of interesting. Before SR 26.2 came out, our website had a lot of references to SR 11.7, and it said we're killing it because we know this space so well. And if I go back to my early trading days, I was a little unique even on the floor. I started writing my own risk models. One, I have an acumen for math, but two, I was bored and thought I could probably come up with something better than what we had. And
that seems counterintuitive. I'm sorry to cut you off, but it seems counterintuitive for a trader to want to manage risk better. Wouldn't you be wanting to take more? But you want to take more risk. And not, okay, I answered my own question.
Your moment.
Okay. If you're managing risk well, you could take more risk as long as you are managing it well.
And
and have higher returns. Yes.
Yeah, and also argue against some of the restrictive results I was getting from the corporate risk measures. The reality is I think this risk measure is stale, and I have my own kind of data points to prove it, and here I can show those to you. And sometimes it would play, and sometimes people would say,
I don't care. It's a rule. It's a rule. Yeah, yeah. You bet the rule.
Yeah.
Yes.
Hey, by the
Yeah,
way, you're a kid and you might be
yeah,
bright, but we're not betting
yeah,
the
yeah.
farm on you.
Blah blah blah. Fix
Yeah.
the model. I mean, fix your stay within the guidelines.
Yeah.
Interesting.
We've done a lot in the model risk management space. Just
Mm,
like it's, I enjoy it. It's good work. With SR 11.7, it's I have to say, out of all the regulatory issues that we get brought into, I see a lot more regulatory issues in the model risk management space
really.
because that is people managing risk in
Mm,
financial institutions, and so much that is model driven.
mm,
So, and the bigger banks, they're spending, you're not measuring this in tens of millions. They're
mm.
spending, $100+ million a year just on this activity of model testing and model validation. And
And when you
that's
said, and
like, that's not
that's
just
been
human capital costs, that's whole infrastructure supporting it. It's, and those are the big banks. And the smaller banks, they'll have fewer models, but the work itself is just as intense. So when I started looking at this, come back to our offering, how did we end up doing it? We
mm,
built it out of necessity on a client project because we had to do something quicker than the time that was allotted.
got it.
So we had a client that was facing an MRIA, which is a matter requiring immediate attention. You only go
Which is the
one
worst of
direction.
those.
Yeah, I mean, it's a cease and desist or a consent order after that. So it's you got a date by which you have to solve everything. We had closed all elements of the MRIA and in less time than they even thought it was going to take. And there was still 2 months before the examination. And then this client came and said, there's this one other thing that we keep getting asked about
Oh boy.
and it deals with the MRIA. I said, well, we've closed everything. And they said, well, there's an MRA that we have that references the MRIA. And I said, what is that? They show me the MRA. And they show
And
it
there,
to me. And sure enough, the MRA was written after the MRA. And in the MRA, it says that this should be joined to the work being done on the MRIA. But nobody ever told us. So the MRA was around ineffective model risk management practices. And it was like, Tom, it was every question that I asked, it went from bad to worse.
oh boy.
It almost felt like, do you have any model risk management in place?
Mm,
So I said, well, let's look at your testing. And anybody who knows kind of just the basics of model testing knows
sure.
that you need substantive periods with stress events to really kind of have a decent test. And
Yeah,
substantive, you really need like a year's worth of data.
sure.
This
And the more data and the more events within that period are
exactly,
more spikes
exactly.
are a better way to get a gauge of the upper and lower bound, well, not the lower bounds, but the upper bounds of the risk model.
Yeah. So, I know that banks spend 3 to 6 months doing model testing and validation work for each individual methodology. And we were given 2 months before the exam.
Oh
And
man.
my old firm was already there working on it and had been working on it for a year, Ernst and Young.
Mm,
And I said, well, how much progress has Ernst and Young made? They said, they just gave us a plan. And I said, a plan? It all has to be done. Like,
yeah.
I
Well,
said,
yeah. There's
yeah, you can't give them a plan at this point. They've been working on it for a year. So then to get it all done, we started building an application in the background in parallel to working kind of around the clock. And I said, we're going to have to be a lot more inventive with this. And we're going to have to cut out a couple pieces that aren't like materially changing kind of the risk perspective.
Okay.
So we said, well, because you can't do it all. So let's say, all right, well, what can we do? They also didn't have a year's worth of data. The most they had was 6 months.
Mm,
We said, okay, well, you got to have 2 historical periods. So we'll break the 6 months into 2 3-month periods. And then we got lucky that there was a stress event in one of those.
okay.
But when we were building this application, took a while, but we ultimately ended up grounding it on output that wouldn't be all over the place.
Okay.
One document that maps back to all the regulatory guidelines in a table of
Okay.
contents so that a regulator doesn't have to say, can we now see this? because it's all in one package.
Yeah. It's all tied up in one package.
Yeah, and we followed a very structured approach that, SR 11.7 talks to elements in it, not all of it, but we said, look, we're going to do a Kupiak test, which is a very standard kind of model test, followed by a Christofferson test, followed by a traffic light approach. Then we're going to measure stickiness in the portfolio. So we went through kind of a very staged approach to get to what are the optimal set of parameters and settings for that methodology.
Okay.
We finished all of the work. We did 3 methodologies, 60 permutations of parameters and settings on each methodology, full test results, ran it through the validation group, which said, the validation team said, you already did all the validation work. We said, well, we did because we thought it might help, but you still need to look at it because you still need an independent group to look at it. And we locked them in a conference room for a week and walked them through everything. So all of it was done in 2 months.
That's amazing.
And then I said, okay, now wait a second. Now let's have some fun. This was a lot of working around the clock for us. Like Andrea, my wife, she was like, you work today 20 hours. What are you doing? And I was like, well, we have a very limited amount of time to get this all done. So it was a lot of heavy lifting, but the fun started as soon as we delivered everything. Because I said, all right, now we got to really harden this application. And at the point where we were building it, we had kind of one AI agent in it. I said, okay, I'm getting fiction at points out of this, like hallucinations on publications that aren't real. I said, no, we need our own library, and it can never reference anything that's not in the library.
Oh, I see. As sources of
so we started putting lots of guardrails on it. We also started putting in more than one AI agent so that we could start, balancing different answers.
That's great.
And the beauty, Tom, is that we now can do full end-to-end model testing in less than a month on the application. So you feed us all of your execution runs, we can do all the testing and give you output that makes validation a non-event.
That's fantastic.
So it could be a huge save for banks that are looking, like every bank's looking to reduce their operational cost.
Sure.
If anybody were to use this, they would say, wow, okay, so I can do a lot more in a lot less time. Sure. And it's not about getting rid of people per se, but rather starting to redeploy people to be like, you have a PhD in mathematics doing testing.
It just doesn't make sense.
At what point did that ever make sense?
Never.
You want that PhD looking at answers or results or observations and insights.
Designing new tests.
Make sense.
Yeah. Coming up with new tests, coming up with novel approaches, right? It's the creative side. This is the hope I have for AI. It can mitigate or ameliorate the lower cognitive work, the more repetitive tasks, the more it can do really interesting things, especially when you have one agent checking the other agent's work. I found that to be just incredibly useful, but I'm not convinced that that you can eliminate that human who understands how it works and can vet and validate the results. This is where we are now. Who knows where we'll be, in the future.
I will say, I think it does a little bit more than the kind of the most easily executable tasks or the kind of lower cognitive items. Yeah. I will say, for the work that I did at that last client where we did all that, in a very compressed time, the output, when the Fed showed up for the exam, they said they've never seen output like it before. They were blown away. They said if everybody had output like this, there would be no need for us to be doing examinations.
Just a grave examination.
They could not believe that they didn't have to hunt and peck for everything, and it was indexed back to regs. But the other thing that I realized very quickly, because this was starting to come out, like we were getting output at the point where we're kind of wrapping stuff up that we're all doing manually. And I was getting better insights, like observations on testing results against different market conditions that I didn't see with the naked eye, but that AI found.
That's a really good, that's a
and
really
that's
good
not
unexpected outcome.
I've made a career doing this, and it was telling me things I didn't immediately see.
That's amazing. So to sort of make sure I understand you correctly. You're basically saying, look, as an industry professional, I've ran it, put it through the ropes. We built this application, came out with this output, right? That was required. Then you set the AI loose on the results and to do additional analysis, and it came up with insights that you didn't necessarily catch yourself.
Yeah. And it came up with kind of anomalies in market conditions
Interesting.
for certain parameters and settings that actually flew in the face of academia.
That's wild.
And then this is where I would say this is where the PhD talent should be focused, because you get those types of things and you say, okay, wait a second. Is academia wrong? Or is it such a corner case that you could never solve for it? Or is the insider observation wrong? And, it's not balanced because we have bad data that's being loaded or something like that.
Or it's a small set.
A lot of thinking with this stuff. And that is where you really could be deploying these great mathematical minds.
Yeah. No, I love it. Wow. So given the state of where things are today, right, in not just in your practice, but in capital markets at large, what advice would you give for young people or people in the market that are looking to either enter their game?
That's a really good question. I spend a lot of time mentoring very junior people, and that's usually because I go through all those skip levels to get to the people who are actually doing. You're all of a sudden very junior. So
you're the guy who's doing all the work, and you're 4 years out of college. Wow.
Irony.
Well.
So I would say that it's a great question. A lot of people want to be smart, and I would say there are 3 words that will make you appear smarter than anybody else in the room.
I think I know where you're going.
Don't know. If I could teach, people who are a little bit older, they don't want to say it because they're afraid to say it. So, the really mature, very seasoned executives, they're okay with being, they're not ashamed to say, I don't know. But more oftentimes than not, as you rise to the ranks, you start getting, well, I'm supposed to know this, so I'm not going to let on that I don't know, and I'm going to go try to figure it out after the fact. If you're a junior person coming in, there isn't an expectation that you're going to know everything. Be honest, say you don't know, but then be thinking on your feet, how are you going to find out? So I don't know, but this is what I can do to find that answer. And that is actionable. And it's on. And, those are the 2 things that will pay huge dividends for anybody starting a career.
Oh, I like that. And I can't agree more. My advice to interview candidates I still give the advice, especially for technical people who are being faced with a question that they don't know, the I don't know answer is, in my mind, the critical first step, the honesty, the openness. But I also think there's value in saying, I don't know, but then take an educated guess. I'm talking in the interview scenario. If someone's asking you about a report they did or something, that you should know, or the honesty piece is important. But if you don't know, you don't know, right? But on the interview side of the house, I think it's very valuable to say, I don't know, but I think it could be X. As long as you opened it with, I don't know, you're showing the thinking, you're showing that you're willing to take a chance. That openness is opened even further, saying I'm going to guess, unless it's a completely wild guess.
Yeah, it is funny because I remember somebody talking to me about the I don't know and saying you never want to say that. I mean, if I say I don't know, then nobody would ask me a question again. And I said, no, you're way off base. Saying I don't know actually builds more credibility than 100%. Suggesting you know something that you don't.
Yes.
Because just by saying you don't know, I believe you.
That's actually, I have never considered that, Matt.
It's the quickest form of credibility building is being very honest and saying I don't know. And as long as you can turn that into an action, how are you going to know? How are you going to find out? Those are things that you can then trust and rely on. I would also say if you're talking to a young person, relationships compound. People don't realize that the person that they treat well at 32, that's going to be the CEO who calls you up when you're 52.
Yeah.
Relationships matter. And if you think that they don't, you're wrong. The financial services kind of industry, and you and I have lived and breathed this, Tom, for a long time. You will run into people over and over again over the course of your career. Think about that, because every relationship matters.
Yeah, I can't agree with you more. I have to say one of the ideas for this podcast was talking to my friends that we haven't talked in how long? We launched this venture, and let's understand how things work. Let's get together, and here we are having a great conversation. I love it. Thank you for taking the time. I do like to ask one last question, which is, if you were to give advice to your younger self, your past self, what would that be?
That's a good question. I think the biggest piece of advice I would give myself is specialize early. Generalists add less and less value in the world that we're operating in. So, I think, and you see that too, even with the advancements in technology and AI introduction and all that kind of stuff. If you can focus on specializing, coming up with a special set of skills, you will do far better than a person who is a generalist for their entire career. You want to be in a place down the road where you are the authoritative voice, and you will never be that living as a generalist.
Yeah, I've heard the counter argument in that if you're a program manager, right? And I'm not trying to be spicy here. I'm not just, the counter argument is, if you're a program manager and you're good at what you do, you can build a capital markets program, you could build a building, and I as long as we still need program managers, that's it. I get that case. But I also completely see your point, and I actually agree with your point in that, specialization, you become, like you said, you're proposing, right? You become an expert in that field. Yeah. Do you feel you waited too long to specialize? Is that you? Yeah. You were generalist consultant in the first piece of your career or middle piece of your career? What leads you to that advice?
Yeah, so I could give you even the 1 year view. So a year ago, we redid our website, the AntePartners website. If you looked at our website a year ago, you would have said, okay, so what's the difference between them and Ernst & Young, them and PwC, them, and it says they do everything. Like they're just a broad stroke consulting firm. And a year ago, I challenged 3 people in the firm. I said, okay, so look, I want the website redone, and I'll pay to have it redone. Like, I'm not asking you guys to redo it, but we're going to spend a weekend at an offsite, and we're going to figure out what we want on the website. And I don't want the design. Just what are we doing? Like, what do we do?
Yeah. What's the message?
And one rule: if we don't have a referenceable client, a client who will provide a reference on a service that we do, then it can't be on the website.
Okay.
And that brought our service offerings down from essentially 50 to 6.
And making the strong case for specialization.
No, but this is so here I am, you and I, we're roughly the same age, Tom.
I'm not going to point in my career.
But we go through an entire career, and it's just a year ago with me saying, guys, we're not generalists. Yeah. What do we do?
I like that.
So let's just do the stuff we say we do. Stop. That. A year ago, we actually we did expert witness testimony on our website. Okay. We've done it once, and it was in the first year of business as a favor for an old colleague. It's not our strength. And if I was going to be really honest, Tom, I was the one doing it, and I sucked at it.
So maybe not. So what you're saying is it may not be a repeatable business model.
Yeah. We need to constantly learn. And I would say, even with myself, because I gave that example of the website in the last year. Just a year ago, I'm continuing to ask myself and challenge myself, wait, what am I special at? Yeah. What am I good at? Yeah. And stop focusing on the things that I'm not. The things that any generalist could do and probably not do well. Why do I want to be in that bucket?
Yeah. And when you look at yourself and your firm and you see who you're competing with, right? You can't. You have to specialize. Yeah. You can't. Exactly. You're not. Don't have that bench, the history, the background, blah blah, all the other reasons. So I think that's great advice. Thank you, and thank you for taking the time out. This was an excellent conversation, and I appreciate it. It's always good. I think I've got a list of maybe a few more. Maybe we'll do a part two at some point, because I know
Yeah.
we
Or maybe we're going to do another one of these, and I'm going to ask you all the questions.
I've been wanting someone to do that.
Well, hey,
Maybe
I'm
we'll
your
turn the
guy, and I won't be as easy as you were. I mean, you're kind. You're
I'm just a mere host. What do you mean? Listen, I'm on the hot seat every day at work. So I would love to be on the hot seat in the
yeah.
public eye. See how
Well,
y'all can see how well I dance.
well, challenge accepted.
Awesome. Awesome. You've given me good food for thought there. But again, I want to say thank you so much. I appreciate you.
No, thank
And
you.
I look forward to our next conversation.
All right. Thanks, Tom. Appreciate you.
You bet.
All right.
Hi, everyone. I'm Tom Castriota, and welcome back to the Higher Ground podcast. Whether you're grinding through yet another job application, navigating a tough work environment, or just trying to level up your career, you've found your show. Each episode, I sit down with guests ranging from the C-suite to folks just starting out in their career for honest, unfiltered conversations about interviewing, managing, and everything in between. No corporate spin, no polished PR answers, just real conversations, real stories from people who've been there. This is season 2, and I'm so glad you're here for it. A quick note, all opinions are our own and don't represent any current or past employers. And if this sounds like your kind of show, then please hit like and subscribe. And once again, thank you for joining us. Thank you.